Roger Germann, thank you for joining us on the Illinois channel.
It's great to be here and back in my home state.
For those who don't know, Roger has been in Illinois, involved in Illinois politics, I should say, and lived in Illinois, and you worked with Judy Topinka when she was the state treasurer, and then you moved on to the Shed Aquarium in Chicago and spent a number of years there. And now you are president and CEO of the Florida Aquarium in Tampa, Florida. So congratulations on that new job. And I think you've been there for about 2 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Been down here at the Florida Aquarium in Tampa for about 2 years. But as I like to say, Terry, in 2000, when I went over to the Shed Aquarium, the sharks didn't bite as bad at the Shed as they did in the state capitol on some days.
Why? How did you happen to move from politics to the being in the aquarium business?
You know, it really was a passion of mine. And as you mentioned, so at the time I was press secretary for Judy Topinka, and we were traveling the state and doing all these great things for, the citizens of Illinois. But growing up in Chicago on the southwest side, I spent a lot of time at the Shed Aquarium and Brookfield Zoo, and I just had a passion for animals and wildlife and conservation. And turns out that in 2000, I was on the road and had to make a call to the aquarium for some business. And they said, hey, we're looking for, a communications person if you know anyone. And I love Judy, so I wasn't looking at the time, but it really just kind of called my heart. And I said, you know what, maybe this is a time to, to give back in a different way. And the opportunity opened up at the Shed, and the rest is history.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to tell us not only about your past life, but what you're doing now, and it goes to show that everyone has a new chapter, I guess, that we can share. Yours is an exciting one, and we want to hear more about the aquarium down there in Florida and what you're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you, and it really is. One of the great things about being here in Tampa and the west coast of Florida, it really is the southern suburb of the state of Illinois, if you think about it. I came down here as a kid. We all drove down in that, station wagon and, down I-75. And so this whole west coast of Florida, where Tampa is the center, has these really strong Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Midwestern roots. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to almost kind of be at home at times. But what's really critical that we're doing here at the Florida Aquarium is we are committed to protecting and restoring the blue planet. So you have this great state that is surrounded by water, both salt water from the Gulf and the Atlantic Ocean, fresh water from all of the estuaries that are here where you see manatees thrive. It's just really, lifestyle here is very entwined with nature. So to have the opportunity to be here at the Florida Aquarium and really make a difference in protecting and preserving wildlife is really satisfying. It's important, and I just love we're able to give back as a collective to making our blue planet and our planet a better place.
So Roger, you were working at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. I was just there in Chicago the other day looking out on Lake Michigan, and I often think of it as an inland ocean. Of course, it's fresh water. One thing that was fascinating, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to do a behind the scenes at the Field Museum. And they have experts in all these different fields. And one was, I'll call him the fish expert. And what struck me is he had all these jars of fish that were collected, samples from Lake Michigan, from like 100 years ago. And it's like a database of DNA. And he said, you see this fish? He said, a couple of years ago, this wasn't here, and now it's the most plentiful fish in Lake Michigan. So when you're growing up, you might be a lifelong Chicagoan, right? And you look out and the lake looks the same. But what you're not seeing is the dynamic nature of the life that's changing under the water. It's not stagnant, it's constantly changing. So with that as a background, let me ask you, as having worked for a number of years at the Shed Aquarium, how does doing the job at the Shed Aquarium and their mission contrast with the Florida Aquarium, where you're now literally on the ocean and having also an environmental mission?
Yeah, so you're right. It's an inland lake, and it's one that it's easy just to kind of take for granted. But I had the pleasure while I was at the Shedd Aquarium and serving as their executive vice president to oversee our Great Lakes conservation program while I was there. And so very much in tune with what you saw at the Field Museum, what the Shedd Aquarium talked about, the changing lakes, fresh water, but it is a dynamic lake. As a matter of fact, when I think about a few years ago that they did the America's Cup race right there in downtown Chicago, never been done on fresh water before. And I bring that up just because it tells you the power of Lake Michigan and how you approach protecting and preserving the wildlife there. That transfers down here to Florida as well. So, understanding how water works, understanding how communities work, understanding how we rely on each other, those are similarities that transferred over down here. The difference really truly is a couple things. One is the biodiversity of our backyard, right? So instead of the silver and brown fish that you see in Lake Michigan or Erie and a few others, you're dealing with dynamic, colorful fish. You're dealing with marine mammals like dolphins, and you're looking at sea turtles. So your knowledge base and your connectivity grows tremendously. The interconnectivity, to your point, when you just think of the Tampa Bay region, yes, we have the Gulf of Mexico, we have Tampa Bay that's here, but there's all these little finger lakes and houses and businesses that intertwine with the water, on a regular basis. So you've got to be a little bit more mindful of the actions that humankind has on wildlife, as well as be much more responsive. Taking our animal care response program here, again, coral and sea turtles and animals that are in distress, you're kind of doing that daily, and you're getting those calls when a sea turtle gets struck by a boat. Didn't have that in Chicago. There wasn't a need for that, but it's all is transferred, but it's definitely on a higher scale here with protecting and preserving the magnitude of water and environment that we connect with. Last thing I'll say is it's third largest state in the nation. 160 million people are come and visit here every year. So that opportunity for us to educate and entertain is even more critical, when we're dealing with the quality and quantity of folks who are in our region and in our state.
And one of the things that I know you have done recently is there was saving sea turtles, as I understand it. That was a mission that's part of a ongoing. Let's tell us a bit, and we'll get into the your entertainment things and what there is to do for the family, but just tell us a bit about what you do relative to the aspect of working on environmental issues.
Sure. So I would describe the Florida Aquarium as not only a not-for-profit, but we are committed to being a conservation-based aquarium. And what does that mean? Obviously, you got some education, but we also are rolling up our sleeves to make sure that we are literally protecting and saving wildlife. So you talked about sea turtles. Recently, we opened a $4 million sea turtle rehabilitation center. And why is that important? And I like to jokingly say here in the state of Florida, everybody understands the power of one. Think hanging Chad, right? So a lot of these sea turtles, are endangered. And so if we can rehabilitate endangered sea turtle, get them back into the ocean, that is critical for saving these sea turtles and survival. One thing that I think people forget, Terry, oftentimes is the fact that wildlife and human life and the quality of our life are interconnected. We all thrive off of each other. If you've got healthy oceans, healthy water, healthy animals, you typically have healthy communities and healthy people. And so we want to make sure that we are doing our part to help really overall humankind, and our tool oftentimes is through saving animals. So sea turtles is one. Coral and sharks are the two other that we kind of focus on.
Yeah, and let's talk about the coral. As I understand, just recently, you really had a breakthrough in that you were one of, I guess, the first place to regenerate a form of coral, a particular kind of coral in the Atlantic. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So growing up in Chicago, I never realized the fact that here in Florida, there's something called the Florida Coral Reef Tract. The Florida Coral Reef Tract is the third largest coral reef tract in the world. I didn't realize that, and what I like to kind of coin it as, it's America's Great Barrier Reef. And so that's right here in our backyard, and they are critically important to have coral reefs. they are considered the rainforest of the sea, and because they're underwater, oftentimes they don't get the attention that they deserve. But anything from sport fishing to proteins to, again, a quality of life, whether you live here in Florida, whether you come to vacation and you see all this wildlife, it really has a direct connection to coral reefs. And so we are committed here at the Florida Aquarium to protect and preserve this endangered reef system, which continues to decline based on a lot of factors. And to your point, what was really, really satisfying, I mean, our team has spent a lot of time, but the last 2 years really spent a lot of time trying to dial in, how do we reproduce Atlantic coral in what I call a human care setting? And it's never been done before in the history of the world. And a few weeks ago, we had that breakthrough. And that is really, truly a game changer for hopefully saving America's Great Barrier Reef and barrier reefs around the world.
When someone comes down there to visit Florida, and of course that's one of the most popular places, I would say, in the world, not just for Americans, but people from all over Europe and the world come in there. What is there to do? And I gather it's a great family entertainment place.
It really is. So, I mean, it's an amazing facility. Again, we want to be the cool science teacher. So you can come here to the Florida Aquarium. We have our location, which is really in the downtown Tampa area, surrounded by our river walk, surrounded by hotels, surrounded by great food and historic neighborhoods. But yeah, come on in. You could do anything from get wet in our splash pad to get wet touching an animal, meeting a penguin up close, or you can just come through and learn about Florida wildlife. We have an incredible wetlands exhibit where you walk through and there's free flight birds and there's trees that are growing. And again, you've got a splash pad where kids can just get wet, have some fun, and learn, because no matter what you're doing here at the Florida Aquarium, our goal is to be that kind of teacher and educator. And we think you can have fun and learn. And also we have other science programs that if you want to really, really get in, school programs and others where you can really get into the nitty-gritty of science and help save the world.
So and it's interesting with the growth of aquariums. You have different aquariums around the country and, of course, around the world. I know St. Louis is just about to open an aquarium, so they seem to be, in the realm of entertainment, an interesting combination, as you've been speaking about, of both family fun as well as reconnecting people. And of course, whether it's Chicago or now St. Louis, I mean, people in the Midwest who don't get often near the ocean can have an appreciation of the sea life that is in the oceans and learn more about the world, as well as having fun doing it.
Yeah, I think there's this great connection with the ocean, as you point out, and we always have this connection. And then you think about as the urbanization of the world happens, not just the U.S., but the world. And so aquariums, zoos, serve a really, really important role, not only for the conservation programs that we talked about earlier, but that connection to nature. I am surprised at how many kids, come here. Again, they get wet, they see an animal up close, and they've never had that opportunity in their own personal lives. But I'm happy to say, usually when they walk out, they have learned something, they've created a family memory, and we know that when you experience something and you care for something, that should roll out into your daily lives. And so we really are serving that connection to nature role that we're unfortunately losing in a technology age. On
the aspect of taking your family and kids there just to have fun, how much time would a family, is it an all-day thing? Is it a 2-hour? How long do people normally stay there? And what are some of the things for, I guess, kids of all ages, right?
Yeah, so it really depends on how much time you want to spend, because you can spend an entire day here and what you really ultimately want to do. A typical, let's walk into the Florida Aquarium, let's start at the top, let's work our way around. You probably can do that in about 2 hours. But again, you add into a couple things. You add in a splash pad. We have plenty of folks and members who want to come and and let their kids run around and maybe go over to the bar and have an adult beverage. We also have a Dolphin Cruise, which is 90 minutes, and it goes out into Tampa Bay, and 80 to 85% of the time you're seeing a dolphin or a manatee. There's clearly wildlife that's out there as well. So you can come and visit. You can have lunch. You can play in the splash pad. You can go on a 90-minute Dolphin Cruise, and the next thing you know, it is a spectacular day here at the Florida Aquarium.
And what are your hours? Are you open all year long?
Yeah, just closed on Thanksgiving and Christmas Day, so closed 2 days a year, but typically 9:30 to 5 every day. We do have evening events depending, so what we like to do is just make sure folks go online, they check out the website, look for, the kind of the what do I want to plan my visit, as well as some of the other evening events, weekend events, fun events we're able to add in programs and holiday programs as well.
And we'll put your website up on there, so if people are going down to the Tampa area, they can plan to take that in. And it's always good to see some of these interesting sites that there are, and a lot of times, despite I'm sure your marketing, people are not always aware of what's in any community when we go there, and so it's good to know that, and we appreciate you taking the time to tell us about it. Before we close out, if there's anything else you want to add, please do.
Yeah, I just, again, I think, whether you come here to the Florida Aquarium and visit us, we know you'll have a spectacular time here at the Florida Aquarium. But also, just again, I just encourage, up in Illinois, from Chicago to St. Louis and everywhere in between, there are some great aquariums, there's some great zoos. And we just encourage everybody, Terry, again, to have that connection with nature. When you care about nature, when you care about wildlife, it says a lot about who we are as humankind. And so just take advantage of that opportunity. Again, that's very unique and rare, but is really important.
Well, Roger Germann, President, CEO of the Florida Aquarium, good luck on your mission, on the coral, and all the other great things you're working on. And thank you for taking the time to join us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Terry.